The moment my son threw my suitcase onto the front porch, I knew 12 years of family silence were about to become the best investment I'd ever made. I stood there in my good church dress, watching my own flesh and blood lock me out like yesterday's garbage. Little did they know, yesterday's garbage was about to become worth $8 million. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I promise you'll understand why a mother's intuition is sometimes the only shield we have against heartbreak. My name is Gloria Pratt, and at 72, I've learned that the only thing better than proving people wrong is watching them realize they should never have doubted you in the first place. My son Daniel and his wife Lauren certainly gave me plenty to prove. It was October 15th, 2010 when my world shattered like fine china dropped on a tile floor. I'd been living with Daniel and Lauren for just 3 months after my husband William passed away. Cancer took him quickly. Diagnosis to funeral in 6 months. After 57 years together, I was suddenly alone, helping with my grandchildren while I sorted out my next steps. The life insurance barely covered William's medical bills, but I thought family was supposed to help each other through tough times. I still remember the look on Lauren's face that morning. At 33, she had the kind of sharp beauty that seemed to cut people when they got too close. High cheekbones, perfectly highlighted blonde hair, and eyes that could freeze you where you stood. "Gloria, we need to talk," she said, arms crossed in the kitchen doorway. Daniel stood behind her, his gaze fixed on the hardwood floor I'd helped them afford with my Social Security checks for the past 12 weeks. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my coffee cup on their granite countertop. The kitchen was Lauren's pride and joy, a renovation I'd contributed $5,000 toward when they bought the house. "This arrangement isn't working anymore," Lauren announced, stepping forward like she owned the conversation. "You're too set in your ways, Gloria. The children are confused about who's in charge." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to defend me, to remember I was the mother who'd raised him alone after his father abandoned us when he was only 8. The mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep him in nice clothes and sports activities. The mother who'd never missed a single baseball game or school event. Instead, he avoided my eyes like I was a stranger asking for spare change outside the grocery store. "Where am I supposed to go?" My voice sounded smaller than I intended, the words catching in my throat. Lauren shrugged, the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist catching the morning light. "That's not our problem anymore. You're a grown woman. Figure it out." 20 minutes later, my entire life fit into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. 60 years of memories, photographs, and keepsakes reduced to what I could carry. The rest would go to Goodwill, Lauren informed me cheerfully, as if she was doing me a favor. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Daniel mumbled as he set my bags on the porch. For a split second, I saw a flicker of the little boy who used to cry when I left for my night shift at the hospital. Then Lauren appeared beside him, and his face went blank again. Through the door, I could hear Olivia and Noah crying, asking why Grandma was leaving. "Grandma needs her own place," Lauren told them. "She's too old to keep up with you energetic kids." A taxi arrived as the first drops of October rain began to fall. I climbed in without looking back, not because I was strong, but because I was broken. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Lauren in their window, already measuring the guest room, my temporary bedroom, for new curtains. I had $847 in my purse. No job, nowhere to live. What I didn't have was the slightest idea that this humiliation would become the fuel for the greatest comeback story of my life. The Sunset Motel on Route 9 became my home for the next 6 weeks. And let me tell you, it was exactly as glamorous as it sounds. $43 a night for a room that smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. But it had a roof and a door that locked. After being thrown away like trash, even that felt like a luxury. The elderly desk clerk, Leonard Patterson, took pity on me after the first week. "You're not like our usual guests," he said quietly, sliding an extra towel across the counter. Most of their clientele was either working construction jobs or hiding from something. I was just hiding from the truth that my own son had discarded me like an outdated appliance. Those first mornings were the hardest. I'd wake up in that narrow bed, forgetting for just a moment where I was, and then reality would hit like a physical blow. No grandchildren's laughter, no family breakfast to prepare. Just me and the broken air conditioning unit that made sounds like a dying car engine. But here's what Daniel and Lauren didn't count on. I'm not the kind of woman who stays down. Never have been. When Daniel was young and we had nothing, I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I cleaned offices at night, worked as a hospital receptionist during the day, and took in mending on weekends. Survival wasn't new to me. I'd just forgotten how good I was at it. The first thing I did was walk to the library every morning. Free internet, free heating, and most importantly, free access to job listings. At 60, nobody was exactly lining up to hire me. But I wasn't looking for charity. I was looking for opportunity. "You have experience in bookkeeping?" asked Martha Carson, the owner of Carson's Garden Center. It was my 4th interview that week. She was about my age with dirt under her fingernails and a no-nonsense attitude I immediately respected. 20 years, I replied, smoothing down my only interview-appropriate outfit, a navy skirt suit I'd had since the early 2000s. I handled all the finances for my late husband's contracting business. What I didn't mention was that I'd also spotted at least 3 ways she was losing money just from sitting in her cluttered office for 10 minutes. The inventory system was a mess. She was overpaying suppliers, and her pricing structure hadn't been updated since 2008. "The pay isn't much," Martha warned, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. $15 an hour, part-time. "When do I start?" I asked immediately, trying not to sound desperate. That first paycheck was $240 after taxes, and I treated it like I'd won the lottery. After 6 weeks of watching my savings drain away like water through a sieve, earning money again felt like breathing after being underwater. I found a tiny studio apartment above Mario's Pizza for $650 a month. It was barely 400 square feet with a kitchenette that consisted of a mini fridge, a hot plate, and a sink. The bathroom was so small you had to sidestep around the toilet to reach the shower. But it was mine. No one could kick me out on a whim or decide I was too set in my ways. The apartment slowly transformed from a temporary stop to something resembling a home. I bought a small coffee maker at Goodwill, hung up my few family photos, and splurged on a plant for the windowsill. If this was my life now, I was going to live it with dignity. Every morning, I'd wake at 5:30 a.m., make coffee, and sit by the window watching the sun rise over Millbrook's main street. I'd allow myself exactly 15 minutes to feel sorry for myself, to miss my grandchildren, to wonder if Daniel ever thought about what had happened to me. Then I'd get dressed and get to work. Carson's Garden Center became more than just a job. It became my lifeline back to society. Martha was gruff but fair, and the physical work of tidying the garden center before opening the register gave my day's structure. I started bringing homemade cookies for the staff, a small expense that built goodwill with my coworkers. "These are amazing," Pete, the delivery driver, said one morning, reaching for his 3rd snickerdoodle. "My mom used to make cookies like these. My grandkids loved them," I said, then immediately regretted bringing them up. "You have grandkids?" Pete asked innocently. "They must visit a lot." I turned away, busying myself with arranging receipt paper. "No," I said finally. "They don't." 3 months into my new life, I received a text message that reopened the wound just as it was beginning to scab over. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. Hope you're well. Daniel." No invitation to dinner. No questions about where I was living or how I was surviving. Just 17 empty words that felt more like an obligation than actual concern. I sat on my small love seat, a lucky find at a yard sale, staring at the text for almost an hour. Finally, I typed back, "I am well. Give my love to Olivia and Noah." I didn't ask about Lauren. I didn't mention that I would be eating a frozen turkey dinner from the Dollar General, sitting alone in a studio apartment while they enjoyed the good china and silver I'd given them as a wedding present. That evening, Martha called unexpectedly. "What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" Gloria, "Oh, I have plans." I lied, not wanting pity. "Cancel them," she said firmly. "My sister and her husband are coming over, and I made too much food. I need someone to appreciate my cooking who isn't obligated to praise it." That first Thanksgiving away from my family was a revelation. Martha's small ranch house was warm and cluttered with decades of collected treasures. Her sister Alice and brother-in-law Tom were kind, curious people who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. We played cards after dinner, and for a few hours, I forgot that I was essentially homeless 6 months ago. "You know," Martha said as I helped her wash dishes, "you've completely transformed my bookkeeping system." "It just needed a little organization," I said modestly. "No, it needed someone who knows what they're doing. I've been running this place for 15 years, and I've never seen my profit margins so clearly before." I smiled, feeling useful for the first time in months. "I'm glad I could help. I'm thinking of giving you a raise," Martha continued, handing me a plate to dry. "And more hours, if you want them." The extra income meant I could start putting a little aside each month. Not much, maybe $50 or $60, but it was something. A tiny seed of security in a world that had proven how quickly everything could be taken away. By the time Christmas approached, I had settled into a routine. Work at Carson's Garden Center 5 days a week. Volunteer at the library's reading program on Saturdays. Attend the senior center's coffee social on Sunday mornings. My world was small but stable. Then I received the Christmas card. It arrived on December 18th, a cheerful red envelope with Lauren's perfect handwriting. Inside was a professionally photographed family portrait. Daniel, Lauren, Olivia, and Noah in matching cream sweaters, posed in front of their fireplace. "Wishing you joy this holiday season. Love the Pratts." No personal note, no invitation to Christmas dinner, not even a phone number or address where I could send gifts to my grandchildren. Just a generic card they'd probably sent to everyone in their address book, from close friends to the mail carrier. I placed it on my small fold-out table and stared at it through dinner. Olivia, now 10, had grown at least 2 inches since I'd last seen her. Her smile looked forced, her eyes not quite meeting the camera. Noah, 8, had lost his front teeth, that gap-toothed grin I'd never get to tease him about. They looked like strangers, these children I'd once bathed, rocked to sleep, and comforted after nightmares. That night, I cried for the first time since being thrown out. Not delicate tears, but ugly, racking sobs that left me gasping for breath, curled on my love seat with a thin blanket wrapped around my shoulders. I cried for all I'd lost: my husband, my home, my son, my grandchildren. I cried until there was nothing left, until I felt hollow and spent. In the morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a strange sense of clarity. The grief had washed through me like a flash flood, leaving behind a landscape changed but cleaner somehow. I picked up the Christmas card, looked at it one more time, then deliberately placed it in the trash. If Daniel and Lauren wanted me in their lives, a generic holiday card wasn't going to cut it. I was done waiting for scraps of attention. It was time to build something new. 3 months into my job at Carson's Garden Center, I made my first real discovery. Martha was throwing away thousands of dollars worth of plants each year. Anything that didn't sell by the end of the season went straight to the dumpster. "It's just how the business works," she explained with a resigned shrug as we surveyed rows of brown-leaved perennials and leggy annuals. "We can't keep them through winter, and no one buys plants that look half dead." But I saw something else entirely. I saw potential. You want to do what with the dead plants?" Martha asked, looking at me like I'd suggested we start selling fairy dust and unicorn tears. "They're not dead," I explained patiently. "They're dormant or stressed, and with a little care, most of them can be revived and resold next season." This was month 8 of my new life, and I'd moved from simply surviving to actually planning for a future. I'd received exactly 2 more text messages from Daniel in that time, one on my birthday and another at Christmas. Neither mentioned a visit or expressed any real interest in my well-being. I was truly on my own, and strangely, that knowledge was liberating. "Take them," Martha said finally, waving her hand at the sad collection of plants. "If you can resurrect them, we'll split whatever they sell for next season." That weekend, I borrowed Mario's pickup truck and hauled 3 loads of dead plants to my tiny apartment. My landlord, Mario Gianelli, stood in the parking lot watching with bemused concern. "Mrs. Pratt, this is apartment, not greenhouse," he said, his Italian accent thickening with confusion. "Just an experiment, Mario," I assured him. "I won't damage anything." My tiny apartment became a jungle. Every windowsill, every corner, every available surface was covered with pots and planters. I researched plant care on the library computers, watched YouTube videos on my ancient smartphone, and spent my evenings nursing brown, wilted stems back to life. The neighbors thought I was crazy. Mrs. Chen from downstairs kept asking if I was running some kind of illegal operation. "Too many plants," she'd mutter whenever she saw me carrying another pot upstairs. But by February, something magical started happening. Green shoots appeared. Buds formed. My studio apartment was transforming into a verdant paradise of healthy, thriving plants. I had over 200 specimens, and about 150 of them were not just alive, but flourishing. Martha was speechless when I brought the first batch back to the garden center in March. "Gloria, what the hell?" she gasped, examining a lush hydrangea that had been a stick with 2 brown leaves when I'd taken it. "These look better than when they were new." "Told you they weren't dead," I said, trying not to sound smug but failing miserably. Martha bought back every single plant for half the original retail price. In one transaction, I made $847, exactly the amount I'd had in my purse when Daniel and Lauren threw me out. The symmetry felt significant, like the universe was giving me a sign. But more importantly, I'd found something that felt like purpose again. These plants that others had discarded as worthless had just needed a little extra care, a little patience, a little faith in their resilience. I couldn't help but see the parallel to my own situation. Word spread through the gardening community. "That lady at Carson's can bring anything back to life," people would say. Soon, Martha's competitors were calling, asking if I'd take their clearance plants too. By the end of year 2, I was making more from plant rehabilitation than from my bookkeeping job. I'd also moved to a larger 1-bedroom apartment with a proper balcony and had turned Mario's parking lot into an unofficial greenhouse with his reluctant permission. "You pay extra for water," he grumbled, but I could tell he was impressed by my growing operation. The best part, every healthy plant I saved felt like proof that being discarded didn't mean being worthless. Some things just needed the right care, the right attention, and the right person who could see their potential. Daniel and Lauren had thrown me away, assuming I'd wither and disappear. Instead, I was putting down roots in soil they'd never even imagined. One cool April morning, as I was checking on my latest batch of rescue plants, I received an unexpected visitor. Martha arrived at my apartment looking uncharacteristically serious. "We need to talk," she said, refusing my offer of coffee. "You can't keep doing this." My heart sank. "Doing what?" "This." She gestured at the plants covering every surface of my apartment and spilling onto the balcony. "It's not sustainable. Gloria, you're living in a jungle, and Mario tells me the other tenants are complaining about water damage." I looked around at my green sanctuary. She wasn't wrong. The operation had outgrown my living space months ago. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. "This is my livelihood now." Martha sat on the edge of my love seat, the only surface not covered in plants. "You need a real facility, and you need to think bigger than just saving plants." "Bigger how?" I asked cautiously. "Do you know how much money garden centers across the country lose every year on unsold plants? Millions. Gloria, millions. You've solved a problem that every garden center in America has, and you're treating it like a hobby." I hadn't thought about it that way. To me, this was just survival, a way to supplement my income and fill my days with purpose. "The Small Business Development Center is hosting a workshop next week," Martha continued, "on turning side hustles into real businesses. I've signed you up." "Martha, I can't afford to start a business," I protested. "I'm a 62-year-old woman living in a 1-bedroom apartment above a pizza place." Martha stood, her expression determined. "And 2 years ago, you were a 60-year-old woman living in a motel with less than $1,000 to your name. Look how far you've come already." After she left, I sat among my plants, considering her words. I'd been so focused on survival, on simply making it through each day, that I hadn't allowed myself to think about real success. What would that even look like for me now? I pulled out my phone and looked at the latest text from Daniel, sent on my birthday 2 months ago. "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're well." Still no questions about my life. Still no real interest. Something hardened inside me, Perhaps it was time to show Daniel, Lauren, and anyone else who had underestimated me exactly what this old lady was capable of. The Small Business Development Center was housed in a modern glass building downtown, a stark contrast to my usual haunts. I felt distinctly out of place in my sensible shoes and secondhand blazer as I took a seat among young entrepreneurs in designer outfits tapping away on MacBooks. Victoria Reynolds, the workshop leader, was not what I expected. In her mid-50s, with a sleek silver bob and piercing green eyes, she commanded the room with a quiet authority that made even the most tech-savvy millennials put down their phones. "Most of you," she began, scanning the room, "are here because you have a side hustle you'd like to turn into a full-time business. You're making custom jewelry, coding apps, or selling homemade hot sauce at farmers markets." Her gaze landed on me, and she smiled slightly. "Some of you might have more unusual businesses. That's good. Innovation doesn't always look like the next iPhone." For 3 hours, Victoria walked us through the basics of business planning, market research, and financial projections. My hand cramped from taking notes, but I didn't miss a word. After the session ended, as people filtered out discussing their startup ideas, Victoria approached my table. "You're not like my usual attendees," she said, sitting down across from me. "I'm not," I agreed. "I'm probably twice their age, with half the education and none of the technical skills." She laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "That's not what I meant. You're the only one who took notes on paper instead of a laptop, and the only one who asked questions about sustainable growth instead of fast profits." I shrugged. "At my age, I don't have time for get-rich-quick schemes." "Tell me about your business," she said, leaning forward with genuine interest. I explained my plant rehabilitation work, showing her photos on my phone of before and after transformations. As I spoke, her expression changed from polite interest to genuine excitement. "Gloria, do you realize what you've done?" she asked when I finished. "You haven't just found a clever way to make extra money. You've identified a major pain point for an entire industry and developed a solution." "I just hate waste," I said simply. "Those plants still had life in them." "That's exactly it," Victoria said, tapping the table for emphasis. "You're not in the plant rehabilitation business. You're in the business of turning waste into profit. That's a completely different conversation." By the end of our impromptu meeting, Victoria had agreed to help me develop a proper business plan. "We meet every Tuesday," she said, gathering her materials. "Same time, same place. Bring all your financial records, such as they are." As I walked back to my apartment that evening, my mind was racing with possibilities. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't just thinking about survival. I was thinking about thriving. That night, I dreamed of greenhouses filled with rescued plants, of employees working under my direction, of a real business with my name on the sign. When I woke, instead of the usual momentary confusion and sadness, I felt something new: anticipation. Over the next 6 months, Victoria and I met weekly to develop what she called a real business strategy. She helped me see what I'd been too close to notice. I wasn't just saving plants. I was solving a major industry problem. Garden centers nationwide throw away millions of dollars in inventory every year because they don't know how to handle end-of-season clearance effectively, Victoria explained during one of our sessions. What if you franchise the process, teach other people to do what you do, take a percentage of their profits, and scale the operation nationwide? The idea was terrifying and thrilling all at once. Me, a 62-year-old woman who'd been homeless 2 years earlier, running a national business. But the numbers Victoria showed me were impossible to ignore. We spent months developing a comprehensive business plan. I would start with a proper facility in Millbrook, perfect the rehabilitation process, document everything, and then begin licensing the method to other operators across the country. "The key is systematization," Victoria explained. "You need to turn your intuitive process into a series of steps anyone can follow." I began meticulously documenting every technique I used, every nutrient blend, every environmental factor that affected plant recovery. It wasn't easy translating years of gardening intuition into concrete procedures, but gradually, a system emerged. The SBA loan application was 47 pages long, and I nearly gave up 3 times trying to fill it out. But Victoria pushed me through every section, helping me articulate why this wasn't just some crazy plant lady's hobby. It was a legitimate solution to a real problem. "Mrs. Pratt," the loan officer said during my final interview, "your financial projections seem optimistic." "Sir," I replied, leaning forward with the confidence of someone who'd proven people wrong before. 3 years ago, I was living in a motel room with less than $1,000 to my name. Last year, I turned $50,000 worth of dead plants into $200,000 in revenue. I'd say my track record speaks for itself. The $150,000 loan approval came through on a Tuesday in March. I signed the papers in Victoria's office, my hands shaking slightly as I realized I was now responsible for more money than I'd ever imagined handling. "Congratulations," Victoria said, pouring 2 glasses of champagne she'd hidden in her desk drawer. "To renewed growth," I raised my glass. "To second chances." As I sipped the champagne, I couldn't help thinking about Daniel and Lauren, about Olivia and Noah. They had no idea that the woman they'd discarded like yesterday's trash was now the CEO of her own company. The thought brought a smile to my face that had nothing to do with champagne. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son had thrown me away, assuming I was worthless. Now I was building a business empire based on proving that nothing is ever truly worthless if you know how to see its potential. Within 6 months, I'd leased a 5,000 square foot warehouse on the outskirts of town, hired 2 part-time employees, and established contracts with 15 garden centers across 3 states. Renewed growth, because everything deserves a second chance, was officially born. And so was I. The scared, broken woman who'd been thrown out with the trash was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone stronger, wiser, and absolutely determined to succeed. Not for revenge, though that thought occasionally warmed me on cold nights, but for myself, because the greatest revelation of my late-in-life transformation wasn't that I could build a business from nothing. It was that I had always been capable of so much more than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. My son had unintentionally given me the most valuable gift possible, the chance to discover who I really was when everything familiar was stripped away. And I liked that person. I liked her very much indeed. The warehouse I leased wasn't much to look at. Concrete floors with faded yellow safety lines, metal shelving units that had seen better days, and skylights so dirty they barely let sunlight through. But to me, it was magnificent. 5,000 square feet of possibility. "It's going to need work," Martha said, surveying the space with a critical eye. "A lot of work." "I know," I replied, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "Isn't it perfect?" Martha laughed, shaking her head at my enthusiasm. "Only you would see perfection in a dusty old warehouse." Gloria, the truth was, after living in a motel room and then a tiny apartment, this vast space represented something profound, room to grow, both for my plants and for me. The first month was backbreaking work. I scrubbed the skylights until they gleamed, installed proper lighting, set up irrigation systems, and transformed the sterile warehouse into a nurturing environment for struggling plants. Every penny of the SBA loan was carefully allocated, with Victoria scrutinizing my spending to ensure I didn't waste a dime. "Remember," she cautioned during one of our weekly meetings, "cash flow is what kills most small businesses, not lack of customers, not competition, running out of money before you can turn a profit." I took her warnings seriously. Instead of buying new shelving units, I found a restaurant supply company going out of business and purchased their metal racks at a fraction of retail price. Rather than hiring a professional cleaning service, I recruited 2 high school students who needed community service hours. Every dollar saved was a dollar that could keep us afloat until revenue started flowing. My first 2 employees came to me through unexpected channels. Tommy Ramirez was a 19-year-old community college dropout who had been caught vandalizing the park across from my warehouse. The judge had given him a choice jail time or community service. "I don't know anything about plants," he warned when the court officer brought him to my door. "Can you follow instructions?" I asked, noting the intelligence behind his defensive posture. "Yeah, I guess. Then you know enough to start." Tommy arrived the next day with a sullen expression and headphones firmly in place. I assigned him the simplest task, removing dead leaves from a batch of ferns we'd just received from Westfield Garden Supply. By lunchtime, he'd not only completed the job but had sorted the plants by condition without being asked. "These ones just need water and light," he explained when I questioned the arrangement. "But these over here, they got some kind of issue with their roots. You can tell by how the leaves are curling." I raised an eyebrow. "I thought you didn't know anything about plants." He shrugged, looking away. "My abuela had a garden. I used to help her sometimes." By the end of his mandated community service hours, Tommy had become invaluable. He had an intuitive understanding of plant needs that rivaled my own, and his young eyes spotted problems I sometimes missed. When his service period ended, I offered him a real job. $15 an hour to start, he said, with a review in 3 months. The shock on his face was almost comical. "For real, you want to hire me?" I recognize talent when I see it, Tommy, even when it comes in unexpected packages. My second employee found me. Elaine Fisher walked into the warehouse one Tuesday morning with a resume in hand and determination in her step. "I heard you're the plant lady who's starting a business," she said without preamble. "I'm an accountant with 30 years of experience, and I was just laid off because apparently 55 is too old to do math anymore." I studied her crisp linen pantsuit, immaculate bob, and the fire in her eyes that I recognized all too well. "The position doesn't pay much," I warned. "I'm not looking for much," she replied. "Just a job where my decades of experience are considered an asset rather than a liability." Elaine became our financial guardian angel. She organized our chaotic bookkeeping system, set up proper accounting software, and created financial forecasts that made even Victoria nod with approval. More importantly, she understood what we were trying to do on a personal level. "My mother-in-law lives with us," she confided one afternoon as we were reviewing vendor contracts. "My husband's siblings wanted to put her in a home after his father died. Said she was too much work, as if family is something you discard when it becomes inconvenient." 4 months after leasing the warehouse, renewed growth had its first significant breakthrough. The spring rush had left Carson's Garden Center and 4 other local nurseries with hundreds of plants that hadn't sold, not quite dead, but certainly not in retail condition. Martha sent them our way, along with a desperate friend who owned Sunshine Nursery in the next county. "I hear you can work miracles," Diane Greenberg said, eyeing our operation skeptically as her team unloaded 3 trucks of struggling perennials and woody shrubs. "Not miracles," I corrected, "just patience and proper care." We were about to need both in abundance. The plants from Sunshine Nursery had been poorly maintained for weeks and were in far worse condition than our usual stock. Many showed signs of fungal infection, and several flats of annuals were so dried out they crumbled at the touch. "Can you save them?" Diane asked, not bothering to hide her doubt. "Some," I admitted. "Not all?" "But more than you'd expect." That night, after everyone had gone home, I stayed late examining the new arrivals. The fungal infection worried me. It could spread to our healthy stock if not properly contained. I called Martha for advice, but she was equally concerned. "You might have to trash the infected ones, Gloria," she said. "Can't risk your whole operation." As I was considering this unwelcome advice, Tommy arrived unexpectedly. "Forgot my backpack," he explained, then noticed my troubled expression. "What's wrong?" I showed him the fungal infection spreading through the Japanese maples and azaleas from Sunshine Nursery. "That's powdery mildew," he said, examining the leaves carefully. "My abuela used to mix milk with water and spray it on her plants when this happened. Something about the protein in milk killing the fungus." Milk. I was skeptical but desperate. "Are you sure?" "Nope," he grinned. "But what have you got to lose?" The next morning, we began what Tommy dubbed Operation Dairy Queen. We quarantined the infected plants, then treated them with a solution of 1 part milk to 9 parts water, spraying every leaf surface thoroughly. "This better work," I muttered, watching our milk budget disappear into plant foliage. Otherwise, we just wasted 50 gallons of perfectly good milk. 3 days later, the new growth on the Japanese maples was coming in clean and healthy. Within a week, 80% of the infected plants showed significant improvement. By month's end, we had saved nearly 70% of Sunshine Nursery's discarded stock. When Diane came to check on our progress, her jaw literally dropped. That's incredible," she stammered, touching the healthy new growth on an azalea that had been nearly dead. "Just good care," I said modestly, though inside I was bursting with pride. "No, it's more than that. You have a gift." She pulled out her phone. "I need to tell my sister about this. She owns Green Thumb Garden Center in Westbrook." Word spread through the gardening community like wildfire. By the end of that first summer, we were receiving plants from garden centers up to 100 miles away. Our warehouse was bursting at the seams, and I had to lease additional space in the building next door. But with growth came new challenges. A larger operation meant higher utility bills, more supplies, and additional staff. Cash flow became a constant concern, exactly as Victoria had warned. Then came our first real crisis. It started with a complaint from a garden center in Fairfield. The daylilies we'd rehabilitated and returned to them were dying within days of being placed on their sales floor. "They looked great when they arrived," the manager insisted over the phone. "Then they just collapsed." One garden center could be an anomaly. But when 2 more reported similar problems the following week, I knew we had a serious issue. I drove to Fairfield myself to examine the plants, taking Tommy with me. The daylilies looked terrible, wilted, browning, and clearly failing despite being perfectly healthy when they'd left our facility. Tommy and I examined them carefully, checking for pests, fungal issues, or signs of improper care. "The soil's bone dry," Tommy noted, digging his fingers into the pot. "But that shouldn't happen this fast, even if they weren't watering them properly." I frowned, breaking apart one of the root balls. The interior was completely dry, as if water simply couldn't penetrate. "The soil mix," I realized with horror. "The new organic mix we switched to last month. It must be hydrophobic." We'd recently changed suppliers for our potting soil, going with a less expensive, eco-friendly option to save money. That decision now threatened our reputation and the survival of renewed growth itself. Back at the warehouse, we tested our theory by watering plants potted in the new soil mix. Sure enough, the water beaded on the surface and ran off without penetrating to the roots. "We need to repot everything," I said, surveying our warehouse full of plants. "All of them. Today?" Tommy's eyes widened. "Boss, that's thousands of plants." "I know." My stomach churned at the enormity of the task. "Call Elaine. Tell her we need to order proper soil mix immediately, and see if she can find some temporary workers for an emergency repotting operation." For the next 72 hours, we worked around the clock. I called in every favor I could think of. Martha sent 3 of her employees. Mario and his sons came after closing the pizza shop. Even Leonard from the Sunset Motel showed up with his arthritis-gnarled hands ready to work. By the 3rd day, my back was screaming in protest. My fingers were raw, and I was running on nothing but coffee and determination. But we did it. Every single plant was repotted in proper water-absorbent soil. The cost was staggering, nearly $15,000 in emergency soil purchases, temporary labor, and replacement plants for the garden centers whose stock had died. It wiped out our modest cash reserves and put us in a precarious financial position. "We need to request an extension on the loan payments," Elaine advised during our emergency financial meeting. "Otherwise, we'll be out of operating capital by the end of the month." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. "Make the calls." That night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself a moment of doubt. Had I been foolish to think a 60-something woman could build a successful business from nothing? Was I just postponing the inevitable failure? My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. I opened it, expecting another complaint from a garden center. Instead, it was a photo of a beautiful garden filled with lush, healthy plants. The caption read, "Every single plant in this display came from renewed growth. Our customers can't believe these were headed for the dumpster 3 months ago. Thank you for what you do. Diane, Sunshine Nursery." I stared at the photo for a long time, tears blurring my vision. This was why I'd started Renewed Growth. Not for profit, though that was necessary. Not for validation, though that was sweet. But because I believed in second chances. For plants, for people, for myself. The next morning, I arrived at the warehouse with renewed determination. We'd overcome the soil crisis. We would overcome whatever came next. And something always came next. 2 weeks after the soil debacle, I received a call from a reporter at the Millbrook Gazette. "I'm doing a story on innovative local businesses," she explained. "Your name keeps coming up in the gardening community." The resulting article, "From Trash to Treasure: How Gloria Pratt is Revolutionizing Plant Retail," ran on the front page of the business section. It detailed our unique business model and my personal journey from homelessness to entrepreneurship. I hadn't mentioned my estrangement from Daniel in the interview, but somehow the reporter had uncovered that detail. After being displaced from her family home, Pratt found herself starting over at an age when most people are contemplating retirement. The article read, "The morning it was published, my phone rang continuously. Garden centers I'd never heard of wanted to work with us. Local business organizations invited me to speak at their events. Victoria called, laughing with delight. "You're famous, Gloria. How does it feel?" "Terrifying," I admitted. "What if I can't live up to the hype?" "You already have," she assured me. This is just the world finally noticing. The article brought unexpected attention from a quarter I hadn't anticipated competitors. Within months, 2 similar plant rehabilitation operations opened in neighboring counties. One, Green Revive, was backed by significant investment capital and boasted state-of-the-art facilities that made our warehouse look like a garage operation. "They're undercutting our prices by 15%, Elaine reported grimly after calling around to our client garden centers, "and offering free delivery within a 100-mile radius." The threat was real. Several smaller garden centers had already switched to Green Revive, lured by lower prices and flashy marketing materials featuring young, attractive horticulturists in pristine lab coats. "We can't match their prices," I acknowledged during our emergency strategy meeting, "not without sacrificing quality." "So we don't compete on price," Tommy suggested. "We compete on results." His idea was brilliant in its simplicity. We invited every garden center owner in a 100-mile radius to a demonstration day. Side by side, we showed plants rehabilitated by Renewed Growth compared to those treated by Green Revive and other competitors. The difference was obvious. Our plants weren't just alive, they were thriving, fuller, healthier, and more vibrant than those from our competitors. "The difference is care," I explained to the assembled crowd. "You can't rush plant rehabilitation. It's not an assembly line process. Each plant has specific needs, and our methods address those individual requirements." We didn't win back every client, but we stabilized our customer base and even added a few new accounts from garden centers impressed by our results. More importantly, we established Renewed Growth as the premium option in the market, worth every penny of our higher prices. By the end of our first full year of operation, Renewed Growth had weathered multiple crises and emerged stronger for each one. We had contracts with 27 garden centers across 5 states. Our team had grown to include 6 full-time employees and a dozen seasonal workers. And our financial situation, while not luxurious, was stable. I moved from my apartment above Mario's Pizza to a modest 2-bedroom condo in a nice part of town. Nothing fancy, but it had a small garden where I could experiment with new rehabilitation techniques. And most importantly, it was mine. No landlord could raise the rent or ask me to move. No one could take it away from me. Security. After 3 years of uncertainty. I finally had it, on the anniversary of Renewed Growth's official founding. Victoria insisted on taking me to dinner at Millbrook's finest restaurant, the Oak Room. "We need to celebrate properly," she declared, overriding my protests about the expense. "You've achieved something remarkable, Gloria. Few businesses survive their first year, let alone thrive the way Renewed Growth has." As we sipped champagne in the elegant dining room, I found myself studying Victoria with new curiosity. Over the past year, she'd become more than a business advisor. She'd become my friend. Yet I realized I knew very little about her personal life. "Why did you help me?" I asked suddenly. "That first day at the workshop, you could have just given your presentation and moved on. Instead, you took me under your wing." "Why?" Victoria set down her glass, her expression thoughtful. "Do you want the professional answer or the real one?" "The real one," she smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Because 10 years ago, I was you." I blinked in surprise. "What do you mean, not exactly you?" she clarified. I wasn't thrown out by family, but at 45, I lost everything. My husband left me for his 28-year-old assistant. The divorce wiped out my savings. I had to sell our house to pay legal fees. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I reached across the table to touch her hand. Victoria, I had no idea. Few people do, she said. I don't advertise it, but I understand what it's like to have your life implode in your 50s, to have to reinvent yourself when society expects you to quietly fade away. How did you rebuild? I asked softly. One step at a time, just like you. She raised her glass. To late bloomers. I clinked my glass against hers. To late bloomers. As we enjoyed our meal, Victoria shared more of her story, how she'd fought her way back from rock bottom, earned her business degree in her late 40s, and built a reputation as a small business guru specializing in helping women entrepreneurs. There's something powerful about women our age, she said. We've lived long enough to develop wisdom, but we're still young enough to use it. Most importantly, we've stopped caring what people think. I laughed. That's certainly true. If there's one gift that comes with aging, it's the freedom from seeking approval. Exactly, and that's why businesses started by women over 50 often succeed where younger entrepreneurs fail. We're not trying to impress anyone. We're just solving problems we understand intimately. Her words resonated deeply. Renewed Growth had succeeded precisely because I wasn't trying to build the next big thing or make a quick profit. I was addressing a real need I'd identified through personal experience and solving it thoroughly rather than flashily. As we were finishing dessert, Victoria's expression turned serious. Have you thought about what's next? Next, I echoed. I'm still trying to manage what's now. That's not true, she challenged gently. You've built a solid management team. Tommy runs operations like he was born to it. Elaine has the finances under control. You've systematized the rehabilitation process so effectively that you rarely need to intervene directly. I shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth in her assessment. What are you suggesting expansion? Victoria said simply. Not just more of the same, but something bigger. You've proven the concept works locally. Now it's time to think nationally. The idea both thrilled and terrified me. How would that even work? Victoria's eyes lit up. She pulled a notebook from her purse and began sketching a diagram. Franchise model. You train operators in your methods, license your systems to them, and take a percentage of their revenue. They handle local operations while you provide the expertise and brand recognition. I stared at her diagram, seeing both opportunity and risk. That would require significant investment. Yes, she agreed. But the SBA has programs specifically for expanding proven businesses. And with your track record, private investors might be interested too. I don't know, I hesitated. It seems so ambitious. Victoria fixed me with a penetrating gaze. Gloria, when I met you, you were running a plant hospital out of your apartment and dreaming of a small warehouse. Now you have a thriving business with multiple employees and clients across 5 states. Don't tell me you're afraid of ambition. She was right, of course. I had continually underestimated what was possible, limiting my vision based on what seemed reasonable for someone like me. But who was I now? Not just Gloria Pratt, discarded mother and grandmother. I was Gloria Pratt, entrepreneur and innovator. Let me think about it, I said finally. Victoria nodded, satisfied. That's all I ask. Think big, Gloria. You've earned the right. That night, as I sat on the small patio of my condo looking up at the stars, I allowed myself to truly contemplate what success might look like. Not just surviving, not just stable, but genuinely successful. I thought about the garden centers we'd helped, the plants we'd saved, the employees whose livelihoods now depended on renewed growth. I thought about all the other Glorias out there, women of a certain age, discarded and underestimated, with so much still to offer. What if renewed growth could help them too? The thought sent a shiver of excitement through me. This wasn't just about plants anymore. It was about transformation, of businesses, of lives, of perspectives on what was possible at any age. I pulled out my phone and composed a text to Victoria. Let's talk expansion, thinking bigger. Her reply came immediately. Finally meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., Bring coffee. Strong coffee. I smiled, tucking the phone away. 4 years ago, Daniel and Lauren had thrown me out, assuming I was finished. Little did they know, I was just getting started. The small business development center looked different through the eyes of a successful business owner. The same modern glass building that had once intimidated me now felt familiar, even welcoming. As I walked through the lobby, carrying 2 large coffees as instructed, I nodded to the receptionist who greeted me by name. "Good morning, Mrs. Pratt. Victoria's expecting you in Conference Room B." Conference Room B. Not the public workshop space where we'd first met, but one of the private rooms reserved for the center's most promising clients. The subtle distinction wasn't lost on me. Victoria was already there, surrounded by spreadsheets, market research reports, and her ever-present iPad. She looked up as I entered, her face breaking into a wide smile. "There she is, the plant whisperer herself." I set the coffee in front of her with a mock bow. "As requested, strong enough to wake the dead, or at least strong enough to fuel whatever ambitious plans you've concocted overnight." Victoria laughed, taking a grateful sip. Perfect, and yes, I have been busy." She gestured to the papers spread across the table. "These are market analyses for the garden center industry across all 50 states. I've highlighted regions with the highest concentration of independent garden centers, our primary targets for franchising." I picked up one of the reports, scanning the densely packed information. "This is Comprehensive." "That's my middle name," Victoria quipped. "Victoria Comprehensive Reynolds." For the next 3 hours, we delved deep into what national expansion would entail. Victoria had prepared a detailed roadmap, breaking the process into manageable phases. "Phase 1 is systematization," she explained. "You've already done much of this work, documenting your rehabilitation methods, creating training materials, establishing quality standards, but we need to refine it into a comprehensive operations manual that anyone could follow." I nodded, making notes. "Tommy's been working on video tutorials for some of the trickier techniques." "Perfect. Phase 2 is pilot franchising, identifying 3 to 5 potential operators in different regions and establishing them as our test cases." Victoria circled several cities on a map she'd prepared. "I'm thinking we target regions with different climates, Northeast, Southeast, and Pacific Northwest to start. That way, we can adapt your methods to various growing conditions." The scope of her vision was both exhilarating and overwhelming. This was no longer about saving a few plants in Millbrook. This was about transforming an entire industry nationwide. "Phase 3, Victoria continued, is where things really get interesting. Once we've proven the franchise model works in our pilot locations, we scale up aggressively. Marketing, recruitment, nationwide training programs. Within 5 years, I believe we could have renewed growth operators in every major market in the country." I leaned back in my chair, trying to absorb the enormity of what she was proposing. "This is a lot. Much bigger than anything I've considered." Victoria studied me carefully. "Too big?" It was a fair question. At 64, many people were thinking about retirement, not building national business empires. The safe choice would be to stay local, maintain our current operation, and enjoy the modest success we'd achieved. But when had the safe choice ever brought me happiness? "Not too big," I said finally. "Just a lot to process. This would require significant funding." Victoria nodded. "Yes, it would. I estimate we'd need about $500,000 to execute Phase 1 and 2 properly." I nearly choked on my coffee. $500,000, Victoria. I'm still paying off the initial SBA loan." "I know," she said calmly. "But there are options. The SBA offers expansion loans for proven businesses. There are also angel investors who specifically focus on women-owned enterprises. And..." She hesitated. "I might know someone who would be interested in being a silent partner." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Me," Victoria said simply. I stared at her in shock. But why?" She set down her coffee cup, her expression unusually vulnerable. "Because I believe in what you're doing, Gloria. Not just the business model, though that's sound, but the bigger mission, proving that women our age aren't finished, that we have valuable contributions to make." She hesitated, then continued. After my divorce and cancer treatment, I felt invisible, like society had decided I'd had my chance and was now expected to quietly fade into the background. It made me angry. It still makes me angry. And when I see businesses like yours succeeding, it feels like a personal victory. I was touched by her candor. I had no idea you felt that way. Most women our age do, whether they admit it or not, Victoria said. We're the invisible generation, too old to be considered vital, too young to be completely irrelevant. But that invisibility can be a superpower if we use it right. People underestimate us, which means we can surprise them. Her words resonated deeply. How many times had I been dismissed because of my age? How many potential employers had glanced at my gray hair and immediately decided I was obsolete? So, Victoria continued, her businesslike demeanor returning, I'm prepared to invest $100,000 of my own money as a silent partner in exchange for a 10% equity stake in the expanded business. That gives us a start on the funding and demonstrates to other investors that someone with skin in the game believes in the concept. I was stunned by her offer. Victoria, I don't know what to say. Say yes, she replied simply. Let's build something extraordinary together. That afternoon, I left the Small Business Development Center with my head spinning and a detailed action plan in my hand. Victoria and I had agreed to move forward with expansion, starting with formalizing her investment and preparing detailed franchise documentation. As I drove back to the warehouse, I found myself thinking about Daniel and Lauren again. It was strange how they still lurked in the back of my mind, even after 4 years of silence. What would they think if they could see me now? Would they regret discarding me so easily? The question wasn't productive, I knew. Their opinion shouldn't matter anymore. And yet, some small part of me still craved that validation, still wanted them to acknowledge what I had built from the ashes of their rejection. I pushed the thought away. My success wasn't about them. It was about me, about renewed growth, about the future I was building for myself and for others who, like me, had been prematurely written off. The warehouse was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Tommy was directing a team unloading a shipment of distressed hydrangeas from a garden center in Rhode Island, our furthest client to date. Boss, he called when he spotted me. You gotta see these. They're in rough shape, but there's something weird going on with the soil pH. I've never seen coloration like this before. I smiled at his enthusiasm. Tommy had grown from a reluctant community service worker into a passionate plant expert. He'd even enrolled in night classes at the community college, studying horticulture and business management. Show me, I said, following him to the receiving area. As Tommy explained his theories about the hydrangea's unusual condition, I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with business success. This young man, who society had nearly written off as a troublemaker, was flourishing under the right conditions, just like our plants. That, I realized, was the true measure of success. Not the money, not the expansion plans, but the growth we fostered in everything we touched. Plants, people, possibilities. Later that afternoon, I called an impromptu staff meeting to share Victoria's expansion proposal. I watched their faces carefully as I outlined the vision for a nationwide renewed growth network. This would mean changes for all of us, I concluded. More responsibility, different roles, new challenges. I won't move forward without your support. Elaine spoke first, practical as always. The financials make sense. We've already proven the concept locally. Scaling up is the logical next step. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. I've been saying we should go bigger for months. There are so many plants being wasted all over the country. Others chimed in with questions, concerns, and suggestions. I listened to each voice, valuing their input. These people weren't just employees. They were the heart of renewed growth. So, I said when everyone had spoken, shall we do this? The response was unanimous. Excited nods, raised hands, and Tommy's characteristic hell yeah. All right then, I smiled. Let's grow something amazing together. That night, as I sat on my patio watching fireflies dance in my small garden, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. 4 years ago, I'd been discarded, deemed worthless by my own family. Now I was surrounded by people who valued me, leading a business poised for national expansion. Life's second acts, it seemed, could be even more remarkable than the first. My phone buzzed with a text message. I expected Victoria with another idea, or Tommy with a question about the hydrangeas. Instead, it was a number I recognized but hadn't heard from in months. Daniel, happy birthday. Mom, hope all is well. I stared at the screen, momentarily thrown off balance. It wasn't my birthday. Not even close. My birthday was in February. It was now July. Had he confused me with someone else? Was this text even meant for me? Or had Daniel simply gone through his contacts, realized he hadn't performed his obligatory check-in for a while, and sent a generic message without even bothering to verify the date? Whatever the explanation, the message crystallized something for me. These hollow, meaningless texts weren't connection. They were obligation, performed with the minimum possible effort. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't respond. Instead, I put the phone away and returned my attention to the fireflies, to the present moment, to the life I had built without him. Let him wonder, for once, what I was doing. Let him question whether I'd received his message or simply chosen not to reply. Let him experience a fraction of the silence he'd imposed on me. I had more important things to focus on now. A business to grow. A future to build. A life to live fully. On my own terms. And nothing, not even the lingering ghost of family rejection, would hold me back. Renewed Growth announces expansion into 3 new regions. Read the headline in the Millbrook Business Journal. Below was a photo of me standing proudly in front of our warehouse, flanked by Tommy and Elaine. The article detailed our plans to establish operations in Massachusetts, Virginia, and Washington State through our new franchise model. 5 years had passed since that moment in Victoria's office when we'd decided to think bigger. 5 years of hard work, sleepless nights, unexpected challenges, and exhilarating successes. I folded the newspaper carefully and placed it in a leather portfolio where I kept important mementos. It would join the original article that had first brought us attention, the certificate from the Chamber of Commerce naming Renewed Growth Small Business of the Year, and the letter from the mayor thanking us for creating jobs in Millbrook. My office, yes. I had an actual office now, was a far cry from the motel room where my journey had begun. Large windows overlooked the expanded warehouse operations. Bookshelves held horticultural references and business texts. The walls displayed framed photos of our successful rehabilitation projects and the people who made them possible. At 67, I had achieved more professional success than I'd ever imagined possible. Renewed Growth now operated in 12 states, with 47 licensed operators using our methods. We employed 22 people directly in Millbrook, and our franchise network created jobs for over 100 more across the country. Last year, our combined operations had rescued plants valued at more than $4 million inventory that would otherwise have been thrown away. Garden centers partnering with Renewed Growth reported significant improvements in their bottom lines, and several major retail chains were now discussing potential nationwide agreements. I should have been purely elated. Yet as I looked at the newspaper photo, I felt the familiar twinge of something unresolved. The woman in that picture, confident, successful, surrounded by colleagues who respected her, was unrecognizable from the broken person who'd been thrown out with 2 suitcases and $847 7 years ago. What would Daniel think if he saw me now? The question still surfaced occasionally, though less frequently than before. My son's texts had dwindled to once or twice a year generic messages that conveyed no genuine interest in my life. I'd stopped responding entirely 3 years ago. The silence between us had calcified into something that felt permanent. A knock at my office door interrupted these thoughts. "Come in," I called, grateful for the distraction. Victoria entered, impeccable as always in a tailored pantsuit, her silver bob gleaming under the office lights. At 60, she remained a force of nature, my business partner, mentor, and dearest friend. "May, ready for the Home Depot meeting?" she asked, consulting her ever-present tablet. Their sustainability team arrives in 30 minutes. The meeting with Home Depot represented a potential turning point for Renewed Growth. If the home improvement giant adopted our methods for their garden centers nationwide, it would transform the scale of our operations entirely. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, standing and smoothing my own carefully chosen outfit, a sage green blazer over black trousers. Professional, but distinctly my own style. Let's make history. The conference room at Renewed Growth headquarters could accommodate 20 people comfortably. Today, it held our executive team and 5 representatives from Home Depot's corporate offices in Atlanta. David Chen, their sustainability director, led the discussion. Mrs. Pratt, your success story is exactly what our industry needs, he said as we reviewed Renewed Growth's impact data. Turning waste into profit while helping the environment, that's the future of retail. I smiled politely, still getting used to being treated like an expert instead of an inconvenience. Our methods can be implemented in any garden center operation, regardless of size. The key is systematic attention to plant needs and proper training of personnel. We spent 3 hours discussing implementation strategies, financial projections, and rollout timelines. By the end, we had the framework of an agreement. Home Depot would pilot Renewed Growth methods in their Southeast region garden centers, with potential for nationwide adoption if the results matched our projections. As we shook hands to conclude the meeting, David Chen held mine a moment longer. My mother is 74, he said quietly. She always says that people underestimate what older women can accomplish. You've certainly proved that point, Mrs. Pratt. I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or slightly offended by the age reference, but I chose to take it as the compliment he intended. Please tell your mother I'm just getting started. After the Home Depot team departed, our staff gathered for a celebratory toast. Tommy, now our operations director at 24, raised his glass of sparkling cider. To the boss, he said, grinning at me. Who took a chance on a punk kid doing community service and built an empire that's changing an entire industry? To Gloria, Victoria added. Who proves every day that the most powerful force in business isn't youth or technology, it's perseverance. I felt myself blushing at their praise. To all of us, I corrected. Renewed Growth isn't about me, it's about what we've built together. Later that afternoon, as I was reviewing the draft agreement from Home Depot, my direct line rang. Few people had this number, so I answered immediately. Gloria Pratt speaking. Mrs. Pratt, this is Jennifer Tate from Luxury Realty. We spoke last month about potential properties. I had indeed consulted with Jennifer about the possibility of moving from my condo to something with more garden space. After 7 years of living there, I was ready for a change, something that better reflected my current circumstances. Yes, Jennifer. What can I do for you? The Harrison estate just came on the market, she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. I know you expressed interest if it ever became available. My heart skipped a beat. The Harrison estate was the crown jewel of Millbrook Heights, a 12,000-square-foot colonial on 8 acres of manicured grounds. I'd driven past it countless times, admiring its elegant proportions and spectacular gardens. I thought the Harrisons would never sell, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Mr. Harrison passed away last year, and Mrs. Harrison has decided to move to Florida to be near her daughter. They're asking $4.2 million, but I think there's room for negotiation. $4.2 million, the figure should have been shocking. But after years of managing Renewed Growth's finances, I'd become accustomed to dealing with large numbers. More importantly, I could afford it. Between my salary, business equity, and investment portfolio, my net worth had grown to the point where such a purchase was within reach. I'd like to see it, I said decisively. Tomorrow, if possible. Jennifer's voice rose with excitement. I'll arrange it immediately. 10 a.m. work for you. After confirming the details, I sat back in my chair, contemplating what I was considering. A multi-million-dollar estate in Millbrook Heights, the neighborhood where Daniel and Lauren had always dreamed of living but could never afford. The neighborhood they used to drive through on Sunday afternoons, pointing out their favorite houses and fantasizing about someday. Was I interested in the Harrison estate because I genuinely wanted it, or because some part of me wanted to show Daniel and Lauren what I had accomplished without them? The question was uncomfortable. I'd worked hard to move past my resentment, to build a life focused on my own goals rather than proving anything to those who'd discarded me. Yet I couldn't deny the small, persistent voice that whispered how satisfying it would be for them to learn I now lived in the most prestigious address in town. Contemplating world domination, Victoria's voice startled me from my thoughts. She stood in my doorway, coat over her arm, ready to leave for the day. Real estate, actually, I admitted. The Harrison estate just came on the market. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. The big colonial in Millbrook Heights, with the glass conservatory. That's the one. She studied my face carefully. That would be quite a statement. Gloria, is that bad? I asked, genuinely uncertain. Victoria set down her coat and took the chair opposite my desk. That depends entirely on why you're considering it. Is it because you love the property? Or because you want to make a point? I sighed. She knew me too well. Maybe a bit of both. The estate is beautiful, with incredible gardens I've admired for years. But yes, there's a part of me that enjoys the irony of potentially living in a neighborhood Daniel and Lauren always aspired to but couldn't afford. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. That's honest, at least. But ask yourself this. Would you still want that house if Daniel and Lauren never found out about it? If they never knew you lived there? The question struck at the heart of my uncertainty. Would I still want the Harrison estate if there was no chance of my son and daughter-in-law learning about it? I considered the property itself, the magnificent gardens where I could experiment with new plant varieties, the conservatory where I could nurture tropical species year-round, the spacious rooms where I could host gatherings for friends and colleagues. Yes, I said finally, I would still want it. The property is perfect for me, regardless of who knows I live there. Victoria smiled. Then go see it tomorrow, if it feels right. Make an offer, but buy it for yourself. Gloria, not to impress anyone else. The next morning, I met Jennifer Tate at the Harrison estate precisely at 10 a.m. Despite having driven past the property countless times, I wasn't prepared for the impact of walking through the front door. The foyer alone was larger than my entire first apartment. Sunlight streamed through leaded glass windows, illuminating hardwood floors that had been polished to a warm glow by generations of careful maintenance. A sweeping staircase led to the second floor, its banister a masterpiece of carved mahogany. The home was built in 1892 for the original Harrison family, Jennifer explained as we moved through the grand spaces. It's been meticulously maintained and updated, with all modern systems while preserving the historic details. Room after room revealed new wonders, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a chef's kitchen that could comfortably feed a small army, bedroom suites with fireplaces and sitting areas. But it was the conservatory that took my breath away. Bathed in natural light from glass walls and ceiling, the space was a plant lover's dream. Built-in irrigation systems, temperature controls, and optimal positioning for various light requirements. It was as if the room had been designed specifically for someone with my particular passion. The previous owners were avid gardeners, Jennifer noted, watching my expression. Mrs. Harrison personally designed the conservatory renovation 10 years ago. I touched a potted orchid, admiring its perfect condition. It's magnificent. The tour concluded on the back terrace, which offered a sweeping view of the ground's formal gardens giving way to more natural landscaping, mature trees providing privacy and shade. In the distance, I could see the town of Millbrook spread out below, including the modest neighborhood where Daniel and Lauren lived. What do you think? Jennifer asked, trying to contain her excitement. What did I think? I thought it was perfect. I thought it was excessive. I thought it was exactly what I wanted, and simultaneously more than I needed. I thought about what the 60-year-old Gloria, the one who'd been thrown out of her son's house with 2 suitcases, would say if she could see me now. I'd like to make an offer, I said decisively. Cash purchase, $3.8 million close in 2 weeks. Jennifer nearly dropped her portfolio. Mrs. Pratt, are you sure that's a huge commitment? I was more than sure. Renewed growth was generating enough profit to cover the property taxes and maintenance costs easily. My investment portfolio had grown to the point where I could afford the down payment without touching my business accounts. But more than that, I could afford it because I'd earned every penny through my own intelligence, determination, and hard work. I'm positive, I said, feeling a surge of confidence. Draw up the paperwork. The The sellers accepted my offer within 6 hours. 2 weeks later, I stood in the grand foyer of my new home, holding the keys and trying not to laugh out loud at the absurdity of it all. 7 years earlier, I'd been sleeping in a motel room with less than $1,000 to my name. Now, I owned the most prestigious house in the county. The moving truck arrived the next morning. Though honestly, my furniture from the condo looked ridiculous in rooms this size. I'd need to do some serious shopping, but that was a problem I was happy to have. I spent my first evening on the massive back deck, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and gold over my 8 acres of property. The silence was profound. No traffic noise, no neighbors arguing, just peace and space and the profound satisfaction of a goal achieved. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Saw the real estate transfer in the paper. You magnificent woman. Champagne celebration this weekend. I smiled, typing back, bring the good stuff. We're toasting to new beginnings. What I didn't type, but was thinking, was that some beginnings require endings. And I had a feeling that the ending to my relationship with Daniel and Lauren was about to become very, very interesting. The doorbell rang at 9:17 a.m. on a Saturday, exactly 24 hours after the real estate transfer hit the local paper. I was in my new kitchen, still figuring out which cabinet held the coffee mugs, when I heard that familiar two-tone chime echoing through my marble foyer. Through the security monitor, because yes, my house came with a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. I saw them standing on my front porch like door-to-door salespeople. Daniel looked older, grayer around the temples, wearing khakis and a polo shirt that screamed weekend dad trying too hard. Lauren stood beside him in designer jeans and a blazer that probably cost more than my first month's rent at Mario's Pizza. Behind them were 2 teenagers I barely recognized. Olivia, now 16, had inherited her mother's sharp features, but thankfully not her cold eyes. Noah, 14, looked like a taller version of Daniel at that age, back when he used to build blanket forts and bring me dandelions from the yard. I took my time walking to the front door, my bare feet silent on the heated marble floors. 12 years of silence, and they show up the day after they discover I'm rich. The timing was so perfectly predictable it was almost funny. Well, I said, opening the door, but not the screen. Daniel, Lauren, children I barely know. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Mom, Daniel's voice cracked slightly. We read about the house in the paper. We wanted to congratulate you. How thoughtful, I replied, making no move to invite them in. Congratulations delivered. Anything else? Lauren stepped forward with that bright fake smile I remembered so well. Gloria, we know things ended badly between us. We've had time to reflect, and we realize we handled everything wrong 12 years ago. Handled everything wrong, I repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it? Olivia shifted uncomfortably behind her parents. Grandma Gloria, I barely remember you, but Mom and Dad said you used to make amazing chocolate chip cookies. The girl's innocent comment hit harder than her parents' practiced apologies. She was right. She barely remembered me because they'd stolen 12 years of her childhood from both of us. 12 years of birthdays, school plays, bedtime stories, and grandmother-granddaughter moments that we'd never get back. I did make good cookies, I said softly, looking at Olivia. Then I turned back to her parents. Before I was thrown out like garbage. Mom, please, Daniel pleaded. Can we come in? Can we talk? Talk about what? Exactly. Lauren's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating woman underneath. We're family, Gloria, and family should stick together, especially when... She gestured vaguely at the mansion behind me. When there's room for everyone, there it was, the real reason for their visit, delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Room for everyone. How convenient that they'd discovered their family feelings now that I had 12,000 square feet. Room for everyone, I mused. How convenient that you've discovered your family feelings now that I have 12,000 square feet. That's not fair, Daniel protested, but his eyes were already cataloging what he could see of the house interior. We've missed you. The kids have missed having a grandmother. I laughed, actually laughed, at the absurdity of it. Daniel, honey, you threw me out of your house with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. Lauren told me I was too set in my ways, and that figuring out my life wasn't your problem anymore. Now you miss me." The silence stretched until Noah spoke up. "Dad, what is she talking about?" "Why don't you come in?" I said finally, stepping back from the door. "Since you're so interested in family reunions." I led them through the foyer, past the crystal chandelier and marble staircase, into the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds. I watched their faces as they took in the silk wallpaper, the Persian rugs, the artwork that cost more than most people's cars. "This place is incredible," Noah breathed, walking to the windows. "Mom, look at the pool." Lauren was looking all right. I could practically see her calculating square footage and property values. "It's certainly spacious," she said carefully. "Much too big for one person." "Is it?" I settled into my favorite armchair, a beautiful wingback in navy blue velvet that I'd bought specifically for this room. "I find I quite like having space to breathe." Daniel sat on the edge of the sofa like he was afraid to wrinkle the fabric. "Mom, about what happened 12 years ago, we were dealing with a lot of stress. New mortgage. My job situation was uncertain. Lauren was working full-time with 2 small kids. So, naturally, the solution was to make your widowed mother homeless," I finished. "Very logical." "We thought you'd figure something out," Lauren said defensively. "You're so capable, so independent. We never imagined you'd end up in a motel." I raised an eyebrow. "You never imagined it because you never bothered to check." Olivia was studying a family photo on the side table, one of the few pictures I'd kept from my old life. It showed Daniel as a young boy, maybe 8 years old, sitting on my lap while I read him a story. "Dad, you were really little," she said, fascinated by this glimpse of her father's childhood. "That was taken right after your grandfather left," I told her. "Your dad and I lived alone for 10 years. I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, made sure he had everything he needed for school, drove him to baseball practice every Tuesday and Thursday." I looked directly at Daniel. "I thought that meant something." "It did mean something," Daniel said quietly. "It means everything. That's why we're here." "No," I said firmly. "You're here because you want something. The question is, are you going to be honest about what it is? Or are we going to keep pretending this is about missed family connections?" Lauren's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Fine," she snapped. "Yes, we need help. Daniel lost his job 6 months ago. We're behind on the mortgage, and Olivia needs money for college applications. Happy now?" "Deliriously," I said dryly. "Now we're getting somewhere." "The thing is," Daniel jumped in, shooting Lauren a warning look, "we were thinking you have all this space, and we're struggling with our housing situation." "You want to move in?" It wasn't a question. "Temporarily," Lauren added quickly. "Just until Daniel finds another position, maybe 6 months, a year at most." I looked around my beautiful, peaceful living room, then back at the people who'd discarded me the moment I became inconvenient. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want to move your entire family into my house because you're having financial difficulties." "We're family," Daniel repeated, like it was a magic word that would open all doors. "Family," I mused. "Is that what you called it when you locked me out of your house? When you told me figuring out my life wasn't your problem anymore?" The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Finally, Noah spoke up again. "What happened 12 years ago? Why won't anyone explain what you're talking about?" I looked at the 2 teenagers, these grandchildren I'd been robbed of knowing, and made a decision. "Sit down," I told them. "Both of you. It's time you learned exactly what kind of people your parents really are." "Mom, don't," Daniel warned, but I held up a hand. "Olivia, Noah, 12 years ago. Your grandfather died. I was 60 years old, recently widowed, and I needed a place to stay while I figured out my next steps. Your parents invited me to live with them." I kept my voice calm, factual. "For 3 months, I helped with childcare. I contributed my Social Security checks to household expenses and tried to stay out of the way." Olivia and Noah were listening intently, their faces serious. "Then one morning, your mother decided I was too set in my ways and told me I had to leave, immediately. Your father packed my belongings into 2 suitcases and put me on the front porch. I had $847 and nowhere to go. That's not how it happened, Lauren protested. You were interfering with our parenting decisions, undermining our authority with the children. I made them breakfast, I said simply, and I suggested they say please and thank you. Apparently that qualified as undermining authority. Noah looked confused. But where did you go? What did you do? I lived in a motel for 6 weeks, then a studio apartment above a pizza place. I worked part-time at a garden center for $15 an hour. I smiled at the memory. Best thing that ever happened to me, actually. How is being homeless the best thing that ever happened to you? Olivia asked, clearly bewildered. Because it taught me that I didn't need anyone to take care of me. I could take care of myself just fine. I gestured around the room. Better than fine, as it turns out. Lauren was getting agitated. This is ancient history, Gloria. We're trying to move forward, to rebuild our relationship. No, I interrupted. You're trying to rebuild your bank account. There's a difference. I pulled out my phone and showed them a text message I'd received earlier that morning. This is from Diane Greenberg, a friend of mine who works at the unemployment office. She mentioned seeing a familiar name cross her desk recently. I looked directly at Daniel. You didn't lose your job 6 months ago. You were fired for falsifying expense reports. Daniel's face went white. How did you? I know things. Daniel, I know Lauren opened 3 new credit cards last year and maxed them out on designer clothes and spa treatments. I know you refinanced your house twice to pay for that vacation to Italy. I know you're not just behind on your mortgage, you're facing foreclosure next month. The silence in the room was deafening. I also know, I continued, that you drove by my motel every single day for 6 weeks after you threw me out. You knew exactly where I was living and exactly how much I was struggling, and you never once stopped to check if I was okay. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Dad, is that true? Daniel couldn't look at his daughter. Lauren, however, had switched to full attack mode. Fine. So, we made mistakes. So did you. You could have asked for help instead of disappearing for 12 years. I laughed. Asked for help from the people who told me figuring out my life wasn't their problem. From the daughter-in-law who called me a burden. We were young. We were stressed. You were cruel, I said quietly. And now you want me to pretend it never happened because you need something from me. Noah suddenly stood up, his face flushed with anger. This is messed up, he said, his voice cracking. Dad, you told us Grandma Gloria moved to Florida to be near her sister. You said she didn't want to see us anymore. We never said that exactly, Daniel started. Yes, you did. Olivia jumped up too, her voice rising. You said she chose her new life over being part of our family. You made us think she abandoned us. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with sadness. These children had been lied to for 12 years, robbed of their grandmother because their parents were too proud to admit what they'd done. There's something else you should know, I said softly. About 6 months after I moved out, your father came to see me. Lauren's head snapped toward Daniel. What, you didn't tell me that? You didn't tell her? I asked Daniel, genuinely surprised. How interesting. Daniel was sweating now, his polo shirt sticking to his back. Mom, please. He showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday evening, I continued, watching Lauren's face carefully. He'd been drinking, and he was crying. He said he missed me, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he wanted me to come home. You're lying, Lauren said, but her voice was uncertain. I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to an old photo. I took a picture of the letter he wrote me that night. Would you like me to read it out loud? The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten on legal pad paper. In it, Daniel apologized profusely for letting Lauren convince him to throw me out. He admitted that he missed me desperately, that the house felt empty without me, that he realized he'd chosen his wife's convenience over his mother's well-being. But the most damning part was the last paragraph, where he begged me not to tell Lauren about his visit because she's already threatened to leave me if I try to bring you back. He chose you, I told Lauren calmly. He chose keeping you happy over doing the right thing by his mother, and for 12 years, he's been lying to all of you about it. Lauren turned to Daniel, her face a mask of fury. You went behind my back. You wrote her a letter. I was drunk, Daniel mumbled. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, I said. You were thinking clearly for the first time in months. That's what scared you. Olivia was crying openly now. 12 years, she whispered. We missed 12 years with you because of their lies. But here's the thing, I said, standing up and smoothing down my silk blouse. I'm not the same woman who got thrown out 12 years ago. That woman was broken, dependent, willing to accept crumbs of affection from people who saw her as a burden. I walked to the window, looking out at my perfectly manicured grounds. This woman owns a multi-million-dollar business. This woman has friends who respect her, employees who depend on her, and investments that generate more income in a month than your father made in a year when he had a job. I turned back to face them. This woman doesn't need anything from anyone, especially not from people who threw her away like garbage and now want to move into her house because they've mismanaged their own lives. The silence stretched until Noah spoke up, his voice small. So, you don't want a relationship with us, even now that you know we were lied to. The question broke my heart, but I kept my expression neutral. I want a relationship with you and Olivia. You're innocent victims in this situation. But your parents, I looked directly at Daniel and Lauren, your parents are going to have to earn their way back into my life. If they can. Lauren stood up abruptly, her mask of false sweetness finally discarded completely. This is ridiculous, she snapped. We're your family. Gloria, you can't just pick and choose which parts of us you want. Watch me, I replied calmly. Fine, Lauren continued, her voice rising. You want to play games. You want to punish us for something that happened 12 years ago. We'll just leave. Come on, Daniel, kids. We don't need this. But Olivia didn't move. Neither did Noah. They sat on my expensive sofa, looking between their parents and me with expressions of confusion and betrayal. Actually, Olivia said quietly, I want to stay and talk to Grandma Gloria alone. Olivia, we're leaving, Lauren commanded. No, Olivia's voice was stronger now. I'm 16 years old, and I just found out you've been lying to me for 12 years about my grandmother. I want to hear her side of the story. Noah nodded. Me too. Lauren looked like she was about to explode, but Daniel put a hand on her arm. Maybe we should give them some time, he said quietly. Don't you dare take her side. Lauren hissed at him. I'm not taking anyone's side, Daniel replied, but he was looking at me with something that might have been regret. I'm trying to think about what's best for our children. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man who'd written me that letter 12 years ago. The son who'd been torn between his wife's demands and his conscience. But the moment passed quickly. Fine, Lauren said through gritted teeth. But we're not done here. Gloria, we'll be back. No, I said firmly. You won't. Not unless you're invited. This is my house, my property, and I have an excellent security system. If you show up uninvited again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Lauren's face went through several shades of red. You can't keep us from our children. I'm not keeping anyone from anyone, I said. But I'm also not allowing you to use them as emotional blackmail. Olivia and Noah are welcome here anytime they want to visit. You and Daniel are not until you've proven you've changed. Proven how? Daniel asked, his voice hollow. I considered the question carefully. Start by telling your children the complete truth about what happened 12 years ago. Not your version, not Lauren's version. The truth. Then get your financial house in order without asking me for help. Show me you can stand on your own 2 feet like the adults you claim to be. I smiled coldly. And then maybe we can have a conversation about forgiveness. Maybe. But don't hold your breath. After they left, I sat with Olivia and Noah for 2 hours, answering their questions, showing them photo albums from their father's childhood, and listening to their stories about school, friends, and dreams for the future. They were good kids despite their parents' failures, and I could see echoes of the little boy I'd raised in both of them. Can we come back next weekend? Olivia asked as I walked them to the door. Anytime you want, I promised. I have 12 years of grandmothering to catch up on. As I watched their car disappear down my long driveway, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete satisfaction. Not revenge exactly, but justice. The people who'd thrown me away were now the ones begging for scraps, while the woman they discarded was living in luxury they could never afford. I'd proven that being thrown away doesn't mean being worthless. Sometimes it just means you're finally free to discover your true value. And sometimes the best revenge really is living well. The next morning, I called Victoria to tell her about the visit. "I'm not surprised they showed up," she said after I'd shared the whole story. "People like that always return when they think there's something in it for them." "What surprised me was how little it affected me," I admitted. "A few years ago, I would have been devastated by their obvious ulterior motives. Now, I just feel detached, like I'm observing someone else's family drama. That's what real healing looks like," Victoria said wisely. "When their power to hurt you diminishes to nothing." We were silent for a moment. Then Victoria asked gently, "How do you feel about the grandchildren?" "They're wonderful," I said, surprised by the surge of emotion in my voice. "Smart, perceptive, kind despite everything. I want them in my life. Victoria, I've missed so much already." "Then focus on building that relationship," she advised. "Let Daniel and Lauren sort out their own mess. You've earned the right to choose who you want in your life." Over the next few months, Olivia and Noah became regular visitors to the Harrison estate. They came for Sunday dinners, helped me in the gardens, and gradually filled me in on the 12 years I'd missed. I learned that Noah was a talented artist and Olivia dreamed of becoming a marine biologist. I heard about first days of school, childhood illnesses, and favorite teachers, all the moments I should have been there for but wasn't. Daniel and Lauren maintained their distance, though I heard from Olivia that they were working on their issues. Apparently, my revelation about Daniel's secret visit years ago had triggered some long overdue honesty between them. I didn't particularly care about their marital problems. My focus was on getting to know my grandchildren and continuing to grow renewed growth. The Home Depot pilot program had launched successfully, and we were in discussions to expand it nationwide. Our franchise network continued to spread, with inquiries now coming from Canada and the UK. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was reviewing international expansion proposals with Victoria, my assistant knocked on the door. "Mrs. Pratt, there's a Daniel Pratt here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Want me to stay?" I considered for a moment, then shook my head. "No, I can handle this. We'll finish the proposals tomorrow." Daniel looked nervous as he entered my office, his eyes taking in the impressive space with its view of the warehouse operations below. "This is quite a setup," he said, gesturing around. "Thank you," I replied, not offering him a seat immediately. "What can I do for you, Daniel?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to talk to you, alone, about everything." I studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the visitor's chair. "Have a seat." Daniel sat, looking more uncomfortable by the second. "Mom, I don't even know where to begin." "The beginning is usually a good place," I suggested, keeping my tone neutral. He took a deep breath. "I've been seeing a therapist since your revelation about my visit to your apartment years ago. Lauren and I both have, actually, separately and together." This surprised me. Lauren had never struck me as someone who would willingly examine her own behavior. "The thing is," Daniel continued, "I've been forced to confront some ugly truths about myself, about how I've allowed others, mainly Lauren, to influence my decisions, even when I knew they were wrong." I remained silent, letting him continue. "What we did to you was unforgivable," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I knew it was wrong the moment I put your suitcases on the porch. I've known it every day for 12 years. But I was weak, and I was afraid of losing my marriage, and I convinced myself that you would be fine because you've always been so strong." "I am strong," I agreed. "But that doesn't make what you did any less cruel." "I know." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. Mom, I don't deserve that. And I'm not here to ask for money or a place to stay or anything else." Then why are you here? To tell you that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. Not because you're successful now or because we need your help, but because what I did was wrong. And to tell you that I'm trying to change to be the kind of son you deserved all along. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or deception. All I saw was genuine remorse and exhaustion. What about Lauren? I asked. Daniel sighed. Lauren is complicated. Her own mother was controlling and emotionally abusive. When you moved in with us, she felt threatened in ways she couldn't articulate. That doesn't excuse her behavior, but it helps explain it. She's working through those issues in therapy. And your financial situation. We're selling the house, he admitted. Downsizing to an apartment we can actually afford. I found a new job, lower paying but more stable. Lauren's gone back to work part-time. We're trying to model better financial responsibility for the kids. I nodded, processing this information. And you're telling me all this because you deserve to know that your words that day had an impact. You forced us to face the consequences of our choices, and while it's been painful, it's also been necessary. He hesitated, then added, and because Olivia and Noah love coming here, they talk about you constantly. I don't want my mistakes to deprive them of a relationship with their grandmother. Something in his words resonated with the part of me that would always be Daniel's mother, despite everything that had happened. I can't promise forgiveness, I said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can promise to keep the door open for Olivia and Noah. And if you're genuinely committed to change, I'm willing to see where that leads. Relief washed over his face. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. As he stood to leave, he hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. I've carried this every day since you left, he said, handing it to me. It was a picture of me holding Daniel as a baby, my face radiant with new mother joy. I'd forgotten it existed. I never stopped loving you, Mom, he said quietly. I just failed at showing it when it mattered most. After he left, I sat for a long time looking at that photograph, feeling the complex emotions it stirred. There was still anger, still hurt. But there was also a flicker of something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps its distant cousin possibility. That evening, as I worked in my magnificent gardens, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. From homeless widow to business owner to mistress of the Harrison estate. From discarded mother to respected entrepreneur to tentatively reconciling family member. None of it had gone according to plan, because I'd never had a plan. I'd simply put one foot in front of the other, day after day, refusing to be defined by rejection or limited by others' perceptions. My phone buzzed with a text message from Olivia. Thanks for letting Dad visit today. He came home different somehow. Lighter. Whatever you said. I think it helped. I smiled. Typing back. Time will tell. How's your marine biology project coming? As the sun set over my estate, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a sense of peace that had been long in coming. The road ahead would still have its challenges. Rebuilding trust with Daniel would take time, if it happened at all. Establishing boundaries with Lauren would be an ongoing process. Growing renewed growth internationally would bring new obstacles and opportunities, but I was ready for all of it. At 72, I had finally come into my own, not despite being discarded, but because of it. Being thrown away had forced me to discover strengths I never knew I had, to build a life on my own terms, to become the woman I was always meant to be. Sometimes, life's greatest gifts come wrapped in the most painful packages. Sometimes, what looks like an ending is really the beginning of something far more beautiful than you could have imagined. And sometimes, being discarded is the best thing that can happen to you if you have the courage to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and show the world exactly what they threw away. As darkness fell over my gardens, I turned toward my beautiful home, lights glowing welcomingly in the windows. Unlike 12 years ago, I knew exactly where I belonged. Right here. In the life I had built, in the success I had earned, in the peace I had found. Not because anyone had given it to me, but because I had created it myself, one determined step at a time. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoyed my story, check out The Inheritance They Never Expected and When My Daughter Stole My Identity, two other stories that channel favorites.